Hello and welcome back to Chance Myanmar. Today we are going to be looking at writing business reports. Are you ready? By the end of this lesson, you will have more confidence writing short business reports and you will have a clear structure in which you can follow to complete your report. Let's start by looking at the structure of a business report. So it has 4 parts. First, we have the introduction, then we have the findings, we will then move on to the conclusions, and then we will need recommendations. So let's start writing this business report. How should we start it? Well, at the beginning, you will have your introduction. Now, write this down. You will have what is called a terms of reference. What does this mean and how can we find it? Well, by asking certain questions and writing them down, you will then have a terms of reference. So you need to say who ordered the report and what is the purpose of the report, where does the information come from, and are recommendations given? If you answer these questions, then it forms the terms of reference. You may see an executive summary on some reports, but these are on longer reports. Today we are focusing on writing a short business report. So let's move on to the next part of the report, which is the findings and body. So this is the longest section, and as the name suggests, this is about investigations and research that has been carried out, hence findings. After you have investigated or researched something, you will have findings. The conclusions and the recommendations will follow after. You should try to stick to 1 paragraph per finding. The next part of your business report is the conclusion section. Here, you need to have 1 conclusion for every finding. After the conclusion section, you then need recommendations. Now, you will have clearly set out conclusions and you need to follow the same order with your recommendations. They should be in order. You could bullet point them, you could number them, but they should be in a specific order. Modals are very common in the recommendation sections. You will most likely see should because this is giving a recommendation. You have to be careful with modals like will and must because this is aggressive. So stay away from those. Only if you are giving strong advice should you use must. You will use this one in most cases. Let's take a look at some language points. This is really nice vocabulary that will be commonly used in business reports. So let's go through them. The first one is linking words. So of course, I've told you about the structure that we will follow. So sequences, you will need to set out clearly, and you can do this by using first, next, then, after that, finally. This is going to give a nice structure to your report. Also, addition, moreover, furthermore. I'd like you to look at some other words, some other vocabulary that has the same effect. For contrast, we could use however, nevertheless. This is nice formal language. Finally, cause and effect. So, because, as a result, consequently. I want you to find more words that you could use as linking devices in business reports. We tend not to use I or we, but this rule is sometimes broken. We should use the passive voice to focus on the action done. Consider these 2 examples. So, when we carried out the research would become when the research was carried out. We're focusing on the action done. Let's take a look at some useful phrases that you can use in your business report. So if you want to talk about the purpose of the report, a nice way to start this could include the purpose of this proposal is to, and then you need to say why this report is being written. You could say, the purpose of this proposal is to compare. What could you compare? The purpose of this proposal is to describe, is to evaluate, is to outline. This will be different for each company. Another way to state the purpose is to say, this report aims to, and then why are you writing the report? You could say, this report will investigate, and then what is it going to investigate? You need to fill in the blank. And make recommendations. You will end that sentence. Moving on to explaining, let's take a look at some useful phrases for giving explanations. So we could say, the main shortcoming is. The main shortcoming is. What's the problem? You found a problem. The main shortcoming is. A further problem is, so you're giving another problem. One major disadvantage is. Let's move on to research. So, of course, you have these findings, and that's because some research has been conducted. So, some useful phrases that you could use include a survey of. What research has been carried out? Revealed that. So, the research has shown that. What's the conclusion from this research? Another way is to say, after studying. What have you studied? That's what you'll use to put in there. It was found that. What has been found from the research? Comments from, for example, clients have shown that. I want you to think of some examples. How could you complete some of these phrases? Let's take a look at recommendations and conclusions. Remember, your conclusions will come before your recommendations, and you should have one recommendation per conclusion. Keep them separated. Now, some nice phrases to use for recommendations include, it is recommended that. What's the recommendation? Our chief recommendation is that, and then you will give the recommendation. And remember the point on modals? In order to respond to this, that would be the problem, the company should, and then you will give more detail on what you recommend. Moving on to conclusions, we could say, it can therefore be concluded that. What's the conclusion? For the reasons given above. Remember, you will have your findings above, right? And we are following a nice structure. And finally, you can simply say, in conclusion. In conclusion. Well done. You made it to the end of another lesson. Before I leave you, I want to give you some tips for business reports. So, tip number 1, preparation. You need to prepare. You need to have all the information. Only once you've collected all your information can you actually start to write this report. Tip number 2, use simple language. If you're using more complex language, it's not going to make the report seem more professional. If you're using jargon, it's going to confuse people. Keep it simple. Tip number 3, you need to think about your structure. Try to set it out so that you have one idea in one paragraph, and try to keep your paragraphs to 5 sentences. Well done, and thank you for taking the time to complete this unit. You have been amazing. I hope to see you in the next unit, Unit 4. I'm quite sure it's going to be interesting.